So, howdy doody, everybody. Welcome to the Writers Hangout. My name is Konstantine Paradies, and with me is the inimitable Robin D. Laws, the creator of many genre defining RPGs in the industry, including the Gumshoe system. And a personal favorite is Feng Shui 2. Robin, thank you very much for taking the time to come over.
You're most welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. Actually, a lot of people over in my side of the world don't really know your work here. It's the options for TTRPGs are kind of limited. We're either the options on the menu are either Dungeons and Dragons. Some people have played World of Darkness. Of course, you have contributed to World of Darkness. You've done a lot of work on this, but I'm more interested in the pure TTRPG work you've done. So, could you walk us through this a couple of steps?
Uh, you've mentioned a number of the things that I'm best known for. My first game that I designed in the early 90s as a full core game was Feng Shui, which is the Hong Kong action movie RPG. It was considered quite innovative at the time, in particular, because what it did is it looked at the way that fights are staged in classic Hong Kong action movies and said, how do we do that in role playing games, which typically in combats take every single possible thing into account and try to simulate how a fight would work, and consequently tend to be very slow. So a fight that would take, a few seconds in an actual combat would take 90 minutes at the table, which is the exact opposite feeling you get from watching any action movie, but especially the hyperkinetic action of Hong Kong action movies. So I wanted to speed it up and also make it more creative and reward people for doing crazy things. And for that purpose, the rules specify that players get to define what's in the environment instead of the game master reading out a list of, here's this warehouse, here's all the stuff in the warehouse, and then you have the fight. The players are just encouraged to say, oh, well, obviously this is a warehouse. There's some sporting goods here. There's some skis over here. I grabbed some skis and I whacked the guy with them. Probably not in as many words. And that seems like just absolutely an ordinary part of how we play role playing games today because in the decade since, uh, it has just become standard to allow a lot of uh, player creativity to define the world and what's going on in the world. And so between that and other structures that sped up combat, that's what the original Feng Shui did. Feng Shui 2, which I did more recently, updates that and actually found places in the original rules where it had the entire rule set had not yet advanced to fulfill those goals. And so Feng Shui 2 is really the version that I would point people toward today.
Also,
There we go.
the favorite book on my shelf.
Right. And of course, this is an era now where instead of having to explain to people what Hong Kong action movies were, because when that game first came out, you maybe could find a few of them on VHS. Of course, now we're in the era where they're being issued in beautiful 4K discs, and they're the language, just as the decision to allow players to define things in the environment was had an effect on the aesthetics of role playing. Hong Kong action had an effect on the aesthetics of all action movies, particularly with The Matrix, and just became part of the basic cinematic language. So I was sort of able to spot that coming at the right time and bring that into the world of role playing. After that, I've done many other games, and as you pointed out, the most notable other one currently is the Gumshoe family of games. This is a game that I designed when Simon Rogers of Pelgrane Press came to me and said, "Can you fix the problem in mystery games where you have a skill that allows you to get information and then you roll to see if you get that information and you don't get the information and then you're just stuck." Um, and so I designed a rule set around not doing that. If you have the right skill, you look in the right place, you get the information, and that does more than just prevent roadblocks in the narrative. It also allows the GM to provide the players with all sorts of information, and they have to figure out from that what's going on. So not only do they not fail to go to the old mill where the next scene is, but it feels more like a mystery where you're piecing things together. You're getting more than just permission to move from scene to scene. So there's a number of different games that use the gumshoe system. The first one was the Esoterrorists, which pits modern day agents from various agencies and backgrounds, and even some people from
It's
weird
actually
D&D
also my
backgrounds.
favorite horror RPG. It was the first time I
Okay.
came across Gumshoe right after Call of Cthulhu, and we kept having this issue where we kept inventing reasons to roll different things to find the clues. When I read Esoterrorists, I remember like, oh no, this is great. This is genius. You
Yes,
just find the
because
thing.
yeah, you find the thing, and the third thing that does is that means that the 20 minutes you spend faffing around to find another way to get the information every time you fail a roll can be filled with actual interesting fun parts, and you have more story, you have more stuff going on.
I have a question about the philosophy that led you this into Gumshoe. I want to let you finish, but there's something I want to ask you about how
Please
you
go
came
ahead.
to this. Well, okay. So the notion in Gumshoe system that you just do a thing without having to roll for it reminds me a lot of basic and early versions of Dungeons and Dragons in general, where there was no skill system. You only really rolled for combat because things were uncertain. That's what people wanted to roll for. And later on, for finding traps, spotting hidden doors, etc. In previous versions of Dungeons and Dragons, you just said you did a thing and you did it because your character was hyper competent. And I'm wondering, did this play a factor in you deciding to do this, going more toward the old school?
I'd actually argue that it was the other way around because when Dungeons and Dragons starting having you roll to detect things, secret doors, treasure, that created the template that then, when other designers, including Sandy Peterson of working on Call of Cthulhu, said, well, you have to roll to learn things. And so that treated information like it was treasure. And the issue with that is that failing to get the treasure is uninteresting and perhaps disappointing, except you don't know you failed to find the treasure.
It's
Whereas
worse.
failing to find
Please go on, please go on.
failing to find the information uh, is actively annoying and causes all those problems we've already talked about. So it was not an effort on my part actually to get away from early D&D, but to correct a sort of a false carryover from D&D into information seeking games.
That's very interesting to know. I see it a lot in your design philosophy. You have a knack for finding ways to simplify complicated mechanics. Like for example, Feng Shui is the only game I've seen that does ticks well with the shots. Every other game I've played, Exalted Second Edition, Shadowrun, uh, I can a couple of more that escape me right now. They all overcomplicate the shot systems and the tick systems, and they create this endless grind. While with Feng Shui, would play it and would just go on; it would just happen. Same with for Gumshoe. I don't have a copy of Esoterrorists physical. I have for Trail of Cthulhu, but same for Trail of Cthulhu. Like when I want to start somebody on a mystery game, I start them with Trail because it's an easy entry because it leaves out this basics. So, speaking of, since you have this knack, one of the reasons I wanted to have you over and have this talk was um, a lot of people, especially over here, but also a lot of people online, have decided they all want to make a TTRPG. Like in the back in the day when everyone would make a Heartbreaker, they'd play D&D and they'd say, "I can do that." So, so I
Yes, well,
thought,
at least today you just wind up with a PDF on itch instead of
yes, exactly, or
5,000
like,
copies in your
or a
garage.
moderately successful Kickstarter, or an art book
Yeah,
with terrible rules, whatever. You just
right.
get something at the end. You're right. So, what I wanted was to get your expert opinion on what you believe is the first thing to consider when designing an RPG, because a lot of people get stuck on this. I get stuck on this. Everybody gets stuck on this. Let's say you want to make an RPG. So, should you design concept first or mechanic first?
You should define the core activity of the game. And this is a simple formula. and it is you are X who do Y. So you are uh, uh, antiquarian investigators who confront the Cthulhu mythos. You are vampires engaged in a lethal secret world of intrigue. You are everyday heroes fighting it out with your martial arts abilities against a time-spanning conspiracy. And those all describe trad games, but you could equally well do that with a story game, right? That you are uh, uh, high school students seeking love, or you are a single mom coping with the difficulties of parenthood. There's no tabletop role playing game that you cannot define in terms of a core activity, except the badly designed, annoying ones which don't have a core activity. Uh, so, for example, often with the fantasy heartbreaker you were talking about earlier, if you would go up to a convention table and ask the person about their game, what do you do in this game? You would very often hear, you can do anything, which is a way of saying, my game sucks because I haven't bothered to stop and think about what my game is about. Or also sometimes it means it's D&D, but I started with a mechanical ability that I thought would revolutionize D&D play. But guess what? I got a big doorstop of a book because I didn't start with a clear core activity that was different from existing games, right? If you come up with a core activity that is exactly the same as a whole bunch of other games, you then have to add another layer on top of that, which is a unique design point that makes your game worth playing. Um, Sometimes that's just a simple matter of we have a line of games and a fan base for that rule set. Let's do this genre in our rule set. That's perfectly valid and has led to a bunch of successful games. But if you are starting out as a game designer, you're probably not doing that. You're probably doing your first design. And whether you're borrowing one of the many uh, sets of game mechanics that are available through open licenses, the way that the D&D mechanics are, or Gumshoe for that matter, that solves a whole lot of problems for you. But if you're designing a whole new set of mechanics, maybe you have a mechanical idea in the back of your mind. Maybe you can reverse engineer that into a core activity. But if you don't have a core activity very early on in the process, you're going to have an unclear game that's hard for you to explain to people to get them to want to play, hard for other game masters to explain to people to get them to want to play, hard for you to sell to other people, whether you're doing that online or at a convention or just trying to get them to sign up for your game. So have a clear activity that follows that exact format. You are X who do Y.
Yeah, it's in video game terms we'd call it the core gameplay loop. So essentially, kind of how Mario goes to the right, he reaches the end, reaches the next stage, goes to the right. Um, it's interesting that you mentioned the fact that you need to be able to explain the game because I've been playing since 2003, right? And I've happened on games that are very famous. I won't name names, but I still meet people who tell me this game's amazing and they still can't explain to me what they do. And But still they proliferate. So that's why I asked the question of like the concept first or the mechanic first, because sometimes I feel the concept sells the game to people and they don't realize they're in a trap until it's too late or until it's been made or they've been caught in the hype, which is an unfortunate thing I'm seeing more and more in indie RPGs. I keep finding more and more games that have like a cool concept, kind of like trap people to go and buy it, and then when you actually open it up there's no game in there. There's nothing you
Right.
can quantifiably do.
Yes, you can't stop at having a core activity. That's step one. And that's the step that will guide you through the process of creating the mechanics that support that core activity. But just having a core activity is not enough. You then have to make sure that your mechanical choices actually support what you're doing. And that is having a sort of it's a marriage of aesthetics and analytics to determine what it is that you're trying to do at the table. It's very easy when you're writing rules to get carried away by the implications of those rules and to forget your design goals. That's something that's always very important. And also, a lot of people put things up without uh, playtesting them adequately. Often, people are very good GMs and play their game themselves on the convention circuit, and uh, thereby give people a great experience. Say, oh, this is a great game, but then putting that great game on paper for other people to replicate is a challenging skill. It takes some work because you have to, you know, everything about your game, and in this scenario, you there is a great game that you can run well, but how do you present the information clearly to the other GMs in the correct order so that they will understand what you're doing? So there's also the structural challenge of presenting a rule set, and doing things that will actually work at the table. And I think what you're referring to is there is a tendency in role playing writing to sort of hand wave away issues, or to leave things for the GM to solve.
I mean, it is the way the game works, right? It's a game that's mostly powered by like our soft, fuzzy brain. So we can kind of like hand wave away things. The core understanding of the game since it started has been like abstractions, like the whole hit points debate, etc. So people kind of expect it, and it's difficult to find the good medium for achieving the conveyance. So yeah, I believe you're correct on this. How do you solve this? Because you do a lot of, again, feng shui, the way you handle shots, the way you handle everything. Uh, I it's very easy to explain. It's very easy to understand. The only thing I actually struggled with the rules was keyframes. To be honest with you, I don't know why I got stuck in the longest time. But how do you streamline conveying rules to other players?
That's a real challenge because people think differently, and also uh, role playing game textbooks are uh, self-referential in a non-linear way. There's a lot of concepts that interlock, that you have to have the person grasp all at the same time, and the order in which you put those things, including having page references, is just sort of a case by case challenge, and that's complicated by the fact that if you are sending out playtest kits to people, that is not a that's just a raw PDF of a Word document. So there, maybe you have a table of contents, but you don't have an index. You don't have a layout to point people to the important information. You don't have uh, the ability to have people remember where things are in the text by the placement of illustrations. Um, so it really is a matter of sort of trial and error, and making sure that not only does something run properly at your table, but that you send it out to other people and you find out what problems they have with it. Because people don't tend to necessarily read a giant rule book cover to cover and remember everything in it.
They
You
don't read
can,
the small ones, so
yeah,
no,
you
they
can
won't read the big
have
one.
you can write a rule a whole bunch of times and still have people miss it, even though it's right where it's supposed to be in plain sight. You can also have people uh, project their assumptions from other games onto your games. So, for example, there are lots of people who will look at the way spends work in Gumshoe for investigative abilities and think, oh, well, that means that you always have to spend for things, even though it very explicitly in every Gumshoe book says the exact opposite many times. But there's an, oh, well, this has to be harder because I'm used to harder games that make things more difficult for the players. Surely I must be making things difficult for the players here. So that's another example of you just have to. Uh, there's a certain point at which uh, structure and theory break down, and what people can actually process becomes the important question.
I mean, I think the reason why people get into spends, and I did the same thing when I was running Gumshoe for like the first couple of times, is I had in my mind the idea of resource management that was left over by Dungeons and Dragons. So like I was like, oh, okay, you have spends, you have to use them by the end of the session, to make things hard. That's why it wasn't so much a harder game. It's more like a preconception that you can't get out of your head. So
Right. There's a similar thing in Shadowfist, which was a collectible card game that tied into Feng Shui, where you didn't tap characters the same way you did in Magic the Gathering. And we had to explicitly put a rule in the rule set saying, don't do this thing. And the question, why would you do this thing? It never tells you to do the thing. Well, the
But they
reason
can't
people
help
wanted to
themselves. They
do
have
it
to.
is they knew another rule set and were projecting its rules onto our game.
Okay, so we spoke about rules. I wanted to talk about some of the softer stuff on this. It's kind of like harder to define. So you've worked on both ends of the spectrum. You've both made generic systems that emulate a specific thing, which was with Gumshoe, like we said. You've also done Feng Shui that emulates a specific kind of feel for this. No RPG perfectly emulates their medium that they're going with. Classic. It's a classic idea. For example, the Dungeons Dragons wizard like corresponds to no wizard fiction. That's the idea. So, how let's say I want to make an RPG that perfectly emulates a specific feel or specific type of fiction. Where's the cutoff point? Like, where should I stop worrying so much about it and just learn to love the mess that I've made?
Well, you have to think about it as adapting something into another medium so that a novel and a film uh, operate uh, using different aesthetic tools and have a different user experience and therefore have to have different content to fit that. So in a novel, for example, you can digress for a little while and follow a side point, and or you can spend a lot of time conveying the internal monologue of the characters, and those are both things that are deadly in film. That moving away from the momentum of your through line is very, very difficult to pull off. Uh, Filmmakers who manage to do that are brilliant, but most filmmakers cannot do that. Um, Same with turning internal monologue into voiceover narration. Most voiceover narration is terrible, except for Martin Scorsese films, in which it is brilliant. And so, with that in mind, you are not trying to fully port any genre experience into tabletop role playing. Rather, you're trying to emulate certain things that will remind people of that other genre and follow the logic of that genre while still doing things that work at the table. So a classic example is in most adventure genres, uh, having the hero get captured is a stock element. Happens all the time. Logically, it should happen in role-playing games all the time, except players hate that because they hate to have their agency taken away from them, or feel that they have their agency taken away from them. So, in order to stage a capture scene in role playing, you have to go to incredible lengths that a maker of a James Bond film never has to worry about in order to have that scene still work. Because, of course, uh, in a James Bond film, James Bond is not going to quit partway through because he's angry at having been captured and he's not going to leave the storyline. The actor might not come out of his trailer, but that's a different issue. But there's all sorts of basic things in the adventure source material that are hard to pull off in role playing because uh, the importance of player agency, which is actually the illusion of player agency, which people describe as choice, although they don't really want choice, um, introduces a whole lot of other things that you need to uh, deal with. And so you are making as much of an effort to, just as a film that was literally every scene and thought and moment from a novel would be unbearable. You have to adapt to all of the different demands at the table, a player expectations just being one of them.
Okay, you said something here that I got hung up on, so I want to ask. You said illusion of player agency, but player agency is like everything in RPGs, the way we play them. How do you mean there's an illusion?
Because players talk about choice and they talk about the opposite of choice, which is being railroaded. But when you drill down into, well, what did you mean that you were railroaded? Because actually, there were three different story branches that you could have taken here, uh, and you took one of them, and now you're saying that you were railroaded. What does that mean? And so, yeah, well, we didn't want to do that. That other one, that didn't seem appealing, and we ruled that one out. So we only had one choice. It's like, well, actually, you had three choices. You had considerable agency. Meanwhile, a really great GM, especially in a convention run, can railroad the hell out of people, and they can leave feeling exhilarated and excited and happy because the experience was so exciting that it pulled them along, and the GM made them think that they were making choices when really they were being led. And they actually, what they say, what players, when they're disappointed, when they say they were railroaded, for example, we got captured, is that I didn't get to do my thing, or uh, a thing happened that I didn't like, which is completely different than player agency. But if you say things happened that I didn't like, that makes you sound like a whiner. Whereas if you frame that in terms of player agency, you can it sounds more elevated, right? Another thing is that if you do present players with choices in a scenario, two choices, almost always they go, well, let's do both of those, right? Let's
Well,
split
let's
up.
do the
Let's
third
make sure you
thing
do
that,
both of those things.
yeah, or let's do the third thing that you hadn't planned for and you need to account for it and you make up something on the fly. I think what
Right,
you're bringing up is because I had a lot of players that were like this in the sense that they wanted to do whatever the heck they wanted and they hated just being given choices, specific choices. Maybe the better solution is to make the world, but not build the world like entirely. Just make the world, populate it, and then let player agency act with it, and have the world act back. I think that's
right.
that's the best way. It's the
That's so
least
that's
amount of
sand,
work.
right, right. So that's called sandbox play, and that's
Yeah.
great if you're an improv GM. It's also great if you've got one player who's a backseat GM, who's actually the one making all the choices for everybody. And if he's the one or she's the one conveying the illusion of choice. Because very often, if you put a group of people who are resistant to being presented with choices, uh, a pure improv environment, and say, well, now what do you do? The answer is very often, I don't know, right? That having every choice is just as paralyzing as having one obvious choice. And so that is also an illusion.
Yeah, but I mean, if you have, for example, if you've made a world, right? You're like, okay, there are these factions that I know are going to fight my players, and I know they're going to start trouble, and I know my players are going to start trouble with them, right? So when they get stuck, one of those factions like send some guys to beat them up. So you kind
Right.
of like create a hook that they can follow, essentially,
Yes.
for this. That's how I meant like making it.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're giving them the illusion of choice. You're improvising choices that you present them with, and you're having something come at them that they have to deal with. That's the difference is not whether they have more agency. The difference is whether you are catering the choices to their responses in the moment. So I'm not saying that that is a sandbox play is bad or isn't fun. I think it works extremely well if you have the right group with the right group of people where there is a dominant player who can guide everybody without uh, arousing the resentment of the other players. And that dominant player is very often also a GM who
Yes.
happens to be playing this time.
Yes, that's true. You kind of need a co-GM if you're playing more rules intensive games like Shadowrun or D&D 3.5. Like I call them an accountant. So you need an accountant that's there to kind of help you bean count. Um, all right. So since we're talking about worlds, and since this is a thing that everyone seems to be doing even more than making a TTRPG these days, but it falls into your realm of expertise, when do you feel the world building should come in to making an RPG? Do you feel it should
Um,
be like a later thing, first thing?
the point is, whether it's the first thought, like I want a game set in this world, or I want a world that supports the game, the important issue is not the order in which you think of things, but the relevance of the world to the game. Because very often you will pick up, particularly in fantasy, because that just has more invented worlds, you will open a game book and it's like 100,000 years ago, the elves rose from the molten lava, and gives you this long history. And then And then everything collapsed, and no one remembers all of this. And so the question is always, uh, does the information in the world get to the player interface? And in a way, this is the same issue as Gumshoe, right? Is that how do I get information to people? So how are you going to convey all of this detail about your world? How much do players have to understand about the world to play people who know that world? So, for example, one sign that your world is too complicated is that you have to introduce characters who are from a remote area in the middle of nowhere who don't know the world in order that they can then be given all the exposition for it. And so, in general, there are people who love to build worlds as their own separate pursuit and then put them into a role playing format in order to present them to people. But that is a work of adaptation that's just as difficult as adapting anything from a novel or a film because that world was not created to support the core activity of the game or was just too overwhelmingly large. I do a lot of have done a lot of stuff in the world of Glorantha, and that has a lot of issues with that because it is such a brilliantly unfamiliar world that Greg Stafford created in enormous detail over many decades that uh, even all of the tropes and cliches are unique to Glorantha, and so that makes it a very challenging thing to introduce to people. Um, so, in general, if you are building a world, you want to think about whatever it is that makes the world seem real to you, but also find a way to make it accessible. And if it's in a role playing game format, maybe you've got six binders full of the stuff that happened 100,000 years ago when the elves rose from the lava, but don't put it in your game book unless there's a directly actionable way that the introductory characters can interact with that, right? If it's a big secret of your world that nobody knows, it's irrelevant.
Yeah, I see a lot of people do this with this kind of making an elaborate world, being very proud of it. Then they can't convey it to the players. Or much more often, what happens is someone will make something that's a detail that's in the game world, affects the players, but it's not something you can play through. An example is, for example, when I talk to people and they have this high-minded idea. No, I'll give you better. I'll give you a better example that's published. Have you ever read Jack's Wonderland?
No.
Okay, so Jags was a generic system, was called Just Another Gaming System. I don't know if the publisher is still defunct or not. They have this excellent idea where they're adapting Lewis Carroll's Wonderland into this kind of Silent Hill style, multiple level worlds where all these weird things are happening. And you read the thing, and it's very cool, and you have different cells that interact with each other, etc. And as I'm reading this, I'm like, this is cool, but like I have no idea how to run this. And I know that the second I show it to my players, they're going to be like, "Hey, dude, hey, you want to play D&D? Yeah, you wanna fire up Mario Kart? You want to do anything else?" It's very often we have a high concept and we don't know how it's going to translate into play, or we don't understand how it translates into play.
And that's why we come back to the concept of core activity, right? If you're
Yeah.
designing a really cool world that has awesome visuals that were created by an artist and then you created the world to go with it or whatever, however you get to that world, it's but what do the main characters do in this story? What is their activity? What are they doing?
Even
And
yeah,
very often that doesn't match up with anything in the world material because you have built it as a separate exercise and are then trying to and then you say, well, yeah, then take this and play with it. Well, yeah, but what do I do? What do we do? Who are we? What do we do?
yes. Um, Speaking of, since we're talking about the core activity, one thing that you can't find any resources for, you don't see anybody talking about, because I think most of the people talking about it online don't actually do it, is how do you handle playtesting? Because playtesting has this issue where if you're making a game and you're running it for your friends, like you said before, a lot of things will get hand waved, a lot of things will get assumed, you'll kind of won't care. You don't get any actual data you can do anything with. You don't get any actual feedback you can do anything with. So how what's a good rule for handling playtesting for your game when it comes to making something you can actually present and sell to other people?
So first of all, playtesters who will actually take the time to play your game and give it sufficient attention to give you useful feedback are an incredibly valuable resource. So you have to find those people. It's easier once you have you've published a bunch of games and have a fan base, and you can draw playtesters from the sort of cream of your fan base. Um, so first of all, you have to get those people. The other thing you have to make sure, and it's a mistake that people do sometimes make, is don't create a forum where all of your different playtest groups communicate with each other because they will contaminate each other's actual played experience at the table with the armchair theories that the most dominant personalities in that forum or Discord or whatever it is have. So you have to silo those people off so they're communicating only with you. You want to get, and you need to uh, ignore people's concerns that are unrelated to things that happened in play. If they've often you'll have, well, I didn't actually have time to get a group together, but here are my thoughts. You can thank them for their time and ignore everything they say. Uh, um, Also, when you get feedback from people, uh, you have to separate we had this problem. I suggest you do Z. Z is almost always wrong. Their playtesters are not game designers. They will always give you a proposed solution. It will almost always be incorrect. And if it's a rule solution, it will almost always be a too complicated rule that reminds you of some other game other than one you're designing. But you will be tempted to dismiss the valid concern that you need to address because they supplied a solution that doesn't work. So you have to separate the irrelevant solution from the very, very relevant problem that the players had. And you also have to be able to take a bit of a licking because people who write playtest feedback can be pretty blunt. Or if they really love your game, they can really lobby you really hard to make a particular change that you know is maybe good for that group but bad for everybody else. Um, and so you also have to be able to separate the way that somebody tells you something emotionally from what they're telling you, from the actionable part of that. And so, as a designer or as a scenario writer, you may be tempted to make the smallest possible change to fix something. And sometimes that's exactly what is needed, just a little change in wording. But other times you do actually have to look at things and go, oh, yeah, they're right. So you will sometimes get a comment that you will see it and right away you go, oh yeah, I 100% agree. You absolutely go ahead and make that change. Sometimes you will get three or four people telling you things that you don't want to do, but there's three or four people saying that, so that's a real problem. That's a real thing you need to address. Maybe you can just address it by changing people's expectations. If they thought that a rule was going to do one thing, but you meant it to do another, maybe you just need to explain it better. Or maybe people just don't like that rule, and you're going to keep having that problem when it gets to people's tables when you publish the game.
I mean, yeah, but that's huge. That's the way you are describing it, this sounds like the kind of skill you can't quite teach to somebody. It comes with like years of trial and failure. You have to develop an eye for it. You being able to like gauge feedback. It's hugely important, and I don't think anyone can teach you that off the cuff. Like off.
Well, that's exactly the issue I'm facing now that I'm creative director at Pelgrane Press, where one of the goals is exactly that to teach people to do what Ken and Gar and Kevin and I do, and Rob Hainslow, to teach people how to do the things that we learned through trial and error. So uh, the things that I just said to you, they are possible to articulate because I just articulated them, and that is a set of procedural uh, guidelines that you can follow, and it's something I happen to have just written up in an internal document for Pelgrane. So some to say that some things can't be taught is just a function of the fact that currently those things are not being taught because the industry is too small. And so there are design classes, but they're not quite uh, plugged into the what game publishing needs and requires. But I would argue that a lot of this stuff can be taught, or I certainly hope it can, or I've agreed to waste the next 5 years of my life trying to do it.
No, I think I don't know if they can be. What I meant was you can't teach it to people, but the soft skill, the soft part of this skill set is difficult to. It's something that every designer needs to cultivate by themselves. I'm
Right.
because I work in video games. A lot of the times, what happens, and it happens with writers, happens with designers, happens with everybody. uh, we will all get context blind and we don't understand how to interpret feedback. Like you said,
Yeah.
you don't understand how it is, you don't know what to do, you're getting pushback, you forget how to explain this to people, you forget to think like the audience, essentially. And I don't think anyone can teach you that. Like, I think you are a great teacher. You've explained this very succinctly. But I think, like, for myself, I would need like 5 or 6 years or three really big failures to really like get it into my skull.
Yes.
And
Failure is a much better teacher than any mentor or
oh,
instructor.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Failure is a huge I even made like a whole talk about the importance of failure, but essentially we don't talk about it. We fetishize success, and what happens is I know too many creators who succeeded on their first try, and then they were completely paralyzed and they completely gave up because they're like, I'll never do it again. This won't happen. I'm done. I'm out. And they left. At least, they
Right.
found something else to
They
do,
did
but
something instinctively, but they can't break it down and analyze it and
they
repeat it.
can't put it into words. They tripped
Right.
into a pile of money essentially. They were like, I can't do it again. Where am I going to trip
Right.
again? Yeah.
Because there's three elements to any creative process. There is uh, training, aptitude, and discipline. And so training alone will not help someone who does not have the aptitude to lock into what you're saying and build on it and make it uniquely theirs. Uh, Talent alone will get you, as you suggest, possibly one brilliant project, and that's it. Uh, and uh, and neither of those things get you anywhere without the discipline to just keep working and sit your ass in the chair and keep doing it until you get better. And a lot of people uh, want the fun part and not the work part, right?
They just wanted to appear in front of them. Just
Yeah.
like
So the hardest part of any project is the last 20%, right? Is getting it all right at the end and making it all, and that's when it stops being fun and it's hard work and you have to cut it down to the word length, or you have to see if your idea that you had that you love so much is actually the main idea and all sorts of stuff like that. And so uh, there's a complex interaction between those three factors in terms of someone being able to uh, not just do one great thing, but to keep doing great things year after year.
no, that's actually huge. Honestly, just the last thing you said by itself is like a whole point for an interview. I don't want to keep you any longer, but I had a couple of questions from listeners because I told them we were going to be interviewing and they sent us that, so I wanted to get your responses. So Raul, who was also super excited by this, and he says you're his favorite game designer. Just wanted to let you know. He wanted to know if you feel that you written your magnum opus yet, and he says if not, what would you consider as the criteria for your dream game? Like when do you feel
Uh,
that I've done the biggest thing?
uh, I think I have done a couple of things that are uh, three things that are really key things. And what I'm working on now are various refinements and permutations of those things. So between Feng Shui, Gumshoe, and the one we haven't talked about, Drama System, which is the game of personal interaction that you'll find in the game Hillfolk. And maybe we can talk in a second a bit more about a new version of that is out soon. Um, I think that those are three big achievements. And I'd be perfectly happy for the rest of my career, which is not going to be that long because I turned 61 a couple of days ago. Um, is about continuing to refine those things and to so there's not a dream project that I have been unable to realize, and I'm now in a position where I need to get one other person to agree with me to let me do what my next thing is. So there's not a high bar for that. So I'm pretty happy with uh, having figured out how to do high octane action movies, how to do investigation, and have doing personal interaction and drama. I think that's a pretty good list of things to have done. Plus, there's uh, countless hours of a pretty cool podcast that Ken and I do. I'm uh, still excited by the possibilities of doing things in my upcoming projects, but they are continuing to explore and refine those big territories that I've already claimed.
It's good to know. It's good to know that you achieve the small steps essentially instead of like the big huge thing that everyone dreams is like the thing that's going to make me be forever. It's going to be the big thing. I think it's kind of like a pointless pursuit anyway, in my opinion. So Matt asked, how do you feel about the current state of cosmic horror as a genre?
Um, I think it's interesting that cosmic horror has become a full genre. A lot of that is because of role playing. That Lovecraft was not such a big deal until Sandy Peterson came along and made Call of Cthulhu, and that the popularity of the role playing game uh, helped to feed uh, its popularity among readers of Lovecraft and of the way that it began to percolate into horror cinema, for example. So it is very interesting to see that essentially Cthulhu is a genre now. He's not just a malign entity who cares not for us, but is going to rise from the waves. But he's a style of play, and is also infiltrating other forms and stuff. And so it is. Cosmic horror is not the only interesting kind of horror, but it is one that I relate to in terms of its strange philosophical outlook of being about how the universe doesn't really care about us, and we live in a human-centric universe, but we don't. And I think that contradiction is much richer and more interesting than, for example, the slasher subgenre or the torture subgenre. That those are much more just sort of viscerally about the fear of death and being in our bodies. Um, but the cosmic genre has a lot more to work with in terms of theme and sort of literary motifs.
And it can also be slotted into pretty much anything, right? You can write stories that go from like incidents at Poroth Farm all the way to like House on the Borderland. You can just write anything. You can just adapt it to anything. Slasher is much more narrow. So, since we have a little time, I'd like you to plug your latest projects, what you're working on. You mentioned a new version of Hillfolk.
Right. So coming out very soon, about to go to the printers, is Page Turners. You may be aware of Cthulhu Confidential, which is the first of the Gumshoe one-to-one games for one GM and
Yes.
one player. Page Turners does the same thing for drama systems. So this is a game of interpersonal interaction for one player and one GM. And so what you most often get, and there's some exceptions that draw on other genres, is something that feels like a novel with a single character about their going about their lives, or sometimes there's a couple that feel more like plays. So it has the intensity and focus of the Gumshoe one-to-one games, but it's about personal drama. And so one of them, the sort of introductory scenario that I suggest people look at first is an F. Scott Fitzgerald pastiche. There's one that is a Shakespearean comedy. There's a 1930s screwball movie comedy version. There's a behind the music rock and roll story set in the LA punk scene. There's a number of science fiction stories because thinky style or personal style science fiction takes a back seat usually in role playing to space opera and problem solving. There's and they're just there's a love story between a vampire and a mortal who is dying and does not want to become an immortal vampire. And so I did some of the scenarios. There's also scenarios by Sarah Sam Saltiel, Wade Rocket, and Ruth Tillman. And This, I think, is a whole opens up a whole other style of play within the banner of interpersonal drama, which is something that role playing does uh, much less than it does procedural problem solving. And the book is really gorgeous. It's designed and illustrated by Jen McCleary. So that'll be out from Pelgrane Press. We may have a few uh, if we're super lucky, we'll have some available at the Dragon Meat Convention in London at the end of November. But that'll the main print run will occur early in 2026. So start saving up your nickels.
Nice. Uh, so any plans for Feng Shui 3 anytime soon? Or
I think Feng Shui too did the trick. The
no,
thing
yeah.
about that, the challenge with that has always been that the core book kind of does it. It doesn't. Supplements are fun, but I don't think it's going to need a mechanical reboot anytime soon. So I don't know. Maybe uh, uh, John Nephew and Michelle at Atlas will suddenly get the K-pop Demon Hunters license and need a supplement for that.
That would
But
be that would be perfect. That would be
I've,
perfect,
I've
actually.
I've heard
Yes.
that said.
Yes. Yes, it would be. It would be great. It would be great. Though personally, I'm running it in a campaign that's inspired by Lisa the Painful. I don't know if you know it. It's you've heard of it?
No.
Okay, it's a post-apocalyptic RPG. It's essentially the Earthbound SNES RPG if
All
it was
right.
set like in Mad Max times,
Right.
where essentially all the women have disappeared. They're just men. Everything's like stupid violent. Things are falling apart, and you're just a bunch of kung fu guys in the middle of all this. So, but yeah, it's been Feng Shui 2 has been amazing. Trail of Cthulhu for me has been amazing. Overall, your work has been great. And thank you very much for coming, and for your time and for all your insights. I had so many other questions I wanted to ask you as a follow up, but I would hate to keep you, to be honest with you. Um, but again, thank you very much, and everybody have a good one. And make
You're
sure to
most
check
welcome.
out
Thanks for having
the
me.
make sure to check Pelgrane Press. They have amazing stuff.